When I got married, I didn't tell anyone I'd inherited 3 apartments from my grandmother. Not my friends. Not my in-laws. Not even my husband. I'd worked hard to build a life on my own, earned my degree in engineering, bought my first car, even fixed the sink with my own tools. So when my grandmother left me those apartments, it wasn't a windfall. It was the final step toward the independence I'd been building for years. I thought keeping it quiet would feel sneaky. But instead, it felt like survival. Exactly 7 days after our wedding, the doorbell rang, sharp, aggressive, like someone was about to kick it in. Still in my robe. Standing in the small kitchen of the apartment I'd leased alone years before the wedding, I rushed to the door. And there she was. Diane Whitman. My brand new mother-in-law. Hair perfect. Suit pristine, expression unreadable. But she wasn't alone. Next to her stood a man in a navy blazer, holding a leather briefcase and shifting nervously on his feet. Diane spoke first. "This is Mr. Riley. He's a notary. We just need a quick signature. Simple paperwork, sweetheart. No hello. No congratulations. Just business." I stepped aside and let them in. Not because I trusted her, but because I was too stunned to do anything else. They sat like they'd done it before, Diane on the couch, legs crossed, smiling like a CEO. "It's just a prenup clarification," she said, waving one hand. "We want to avoid any surprises down the road." The notary slid a folder toward me. I opened it. And buried in legal phrasing was a clause. If any assets are discovered post-marriage that were not declared prior, they may be considered joint marital property. My pulse spiked. They weren't here for clarity. They were here for leverage. Looking back, maybe she overheard something at the wedding. Or maybe she snooped. Either way, she suspected. That's when it hit me, this marriage wasn't just a love story. It was the start of a quiet war. Because sometimes, keeping something to yourself is the only way to stay safe. Long before the wedding, before the white dress and the registry and the in-laws, there was just me, Erica Dawson, living in a modest 1-bedroom apartment in East Austin. With a toolbox under my bed and 3 keys I never used in my purse. One was for an apartment near Zilker Park. One for a duplex my grandmother had flipped herself. And the last, for a corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony that faced the sunrise. All 3 were mine. And no one, not even Liam, knew. I didn't grow up with money. I didn't grow up with stability, either. Foster care, bounced between schools, hand-me-down everything. When I was 17, my grandmother took me in. She didn't coddle me. She taught me how to balance a budget. How to negotiate rent. How to read people, especially the ones who smiled too much. She called real estate her exit strategy. Said if you couldn't rely on family, you'd better have a solid lease agreement. By the time she passed, she had 6 properties. 3 went to other relatives. 3 went to me. But she didn't want a big announcement. She told me clearly, "Don't let anyone know what you've got until you know what they want from you." So I listened. And when I met Liam, I said nothing. Not because I didn't trust him. Because I was waiting to see if I could. Liam was different from the men I'd known. He didn't brag, didn't interrupt, didn't mind when I paid for my own drinks. He worked as a high school physics teacher, loved bad sci-fi movies, and used a calendar to plan his grocery trips. We moved in together 2 years before we got married, into my place. Though the lease was updated under both names. He never asked who paid the deposit. I never offered. It worked, for a while. Until we got engaged. That's when things shifted. Not with Liam, but with his mother. Diane Whitman was a different breed of woman. Always put together. Always carrying a leather planner and an opinion she wasn't afraid to give. She smiled with her lips, but her eyes stayed calculating. At first, I tried. I smiled through her comments about our tiny kitchen. The way she'd frown when I wore jeans to brunch. How she referred to me as resourceful, never smart, never successful. Just resourceful. Like a survivalist in a bunker. She asked once, during brunch with Liam's aunt. So Erica, your family doesn't really come from money, right? That must have made it hard to picture a wedding, let alone a mortgage. I nearly choked on my mimosa. Liam was furious afterward. But Diane laughed it off like it was a joke I didn't get. The longer we planned the wedding, the more involved she became. She offered to help us find a place to live post-honeymoon. She printed listings. Drove us to viewings we didn't ask for. Suggested neighborhoods that were closer to her side of town. And every time I politely declined, she smiled tighter. Said things like, well, some girls dream of independence. Others just need to feel in control. She didn't know how right she was. I told Liam, once, halfway through wedding planning. If I ever seem a little quiet about things, it's not you. I just like to keep certain lines in place. He nodded, kissed my forehead, and said, you don't owe anyone anything you're not ready to give. I loved him for that. I still do. But I should have known that Diane would try to collect what wasn't hers. The week after we got back from our honeymoon, Diane started calling more often. At first, it was casual. Just checking in. Need anything? How's married life? Then came the hinting. You two should really think about formalizing your finances, it's what mature couples do. Maybe sit down with a notary. Just in case, one of you has some secret windfall. That last word hit a nerve. I knew she was digging. But I didn't expect her to show up at my door. Not like that. Not with a briefcase. Not with a clause designed to strip away what I'd built in silence. And yet, there she was. I was still holding the folder when the door creaked open. When they left, I just stood there. Folder in hand. The apartment felt colder. Not because of the weather, but because a line had been crossed. One I didn't even know I'd drawn until she stepped over it. Liam stepped into the hallway with 2 grocery bags in his arms, keys still dangling from his hand. He froze. For a second, no one moved. Then he blinked. Looked from me to Diane to the notary sitting stiffly on the couch, and said, "What's going on?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just held up the folder. The word prenuptial printed across the top in bold lettering. Diane stood up smoothly, as if this had all been perfectly planned. "Oh, honey. This is nothing dramatic," she said. "I just thought it'd be smart to take care of some legal housekeeping." Liam looked at her, then at me again. His face shifted, confusion giving way to recognition. Then anger. "Mom," he said quietly. "We talked about this. I told you not to get involved." "I'm not," she said, too quickly. "I'm just helping. This is for both of you. In case something happens." "In case something happens," he repeated. Diane placed a hand on the back of the chair, forcing a smile. "Liam, sweetheart. You married someone who doesn't come from money. That's okay. But we have to be realistic." That was the moment. The one that stripped the last layer of civility from the room. Because for her, this wasn't about protection. It was about control. And for me, this was the test I'd been dreading. Liam turned to me, softening his tone. "Did you know about this?" "No," I said. "They just showed up. I didn't even know she was coming." He turned back to Diane. "You should leave." Her mouth fell open. "I'm serious, Mom. This is not your place." "Liam. You didn't call. You didn't ask. You brought a notary into our home and tried to blindside my wife 1 week into our marriage." I'm just trying to protect you, she said, voice rising. From what? He shot back. From Erica? She didn't respond. Just clutched her handbag tighter and gave me a look, that quiet, sharp glance women like her have mastered over decades. The kind that says you may have won this round, but I'm still watching you. She turned to the notary. Thank you for your time. We won't be needing your services today. He stood up awkwardly, avoiding eye contact as he followed her to the door. She walked out without a word, as if silence could still give her the last say. The door clicked shut. Silence. Liam set the grocery bags down, walked toward me, and gently took the folder from my hands. He opened it, skimmed the contents, paused at the clause I'd already read. Then he looked up. Did you know she was going to do this? No. I said again. But I should have. He frowned. Why? I hesitated. The word sat on my tongue, heavy and fragile. Because I didn't tell you everything, I said softly. And maybe I should have. I walked over to the kitchen counter, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small, beat-up leather pouch. From inside, I took out 3 keys. I inherited 3 apartments from my grandmother, I said. She left them to me before she passed. I didn't tell anyone. Not even you. Liam didn't say anything. I wasn't trying to hide it from you, I continued. I was hiding it from her. Because I knew exactly what she'd do if she found out. Another beat of silence. Then he laughed. Just once. Shaking his head. Well, he said. I guess that explains a lot. I looked at him. Surprised. You're not mad? No. I mean, yeah, I wish you'd told me sooner. But I get it. I know my mother. You were protecting something. And honestly? You had every reason to. That night. We talked for hours. About the apartments. About my grandmother. About the way silence isn't always about deception, sometimes it's defense. He told me he never wanted my money. And I believed him. But the next morning, Diane called again. This time, she didn't ask for signatures. She asked for a family meeting. At her house. Liam didn't want to go. But I did. Because I was ready now, ready to say no, out loud. And mean it. We arrived at Diane's house just before 5 p.m. Liam parked the car in silence. I could see the tightness in his jaw. The way his fingers flexed against the steering wheel. He hadn't said much during the drive, except one sentence that kept repeating in my head. You don't have to prove anything. If this gets ugly, we walk. But I wasn't here to walk away. I was here to take back the narrative. The moment we stepped through the door, I knew this wasn't going to be just a chat. The living room looked like it had been staged for a sitcom confrontation. Diane sat on the beige couch, hands folded, expression smooth. Next to her was Liam's father, always the quieter one. Kind but easily swayed. And to my surprise, Aunt Margaret was there too. The self-appointed family mediator. Armed with a tray of cookies and unsolicited advice. Diane smiled, wide and professional. Erica, thank you for coming. Liam. She motioned to the 2 chairs she'd clearly prepared for us, angled just slightly too close together. I sat. So did Liam. No one touched the cookies. Diane started slowly. I just wanted to clear the air. There's been some tension lately. Liam raised an eyebrow. You mean the notary? Diane waved a hand. That was a misunderstanding. Blown out of proportion. I stayed quiet. Let her talk. I simply wanted to ensure everything was transparent. I had no idea Erica was keeping such a large inheritance secret. That's unusual. Isn't it? She looked directly at me now, her voice gentle but her eyes sharp. In our family, we don't hide things. I smiled. In my family, I said, we protect what we've built. Aunt Margaret gave a small, awkward laugh. Well, now that everything's out, we can move forward, right? Maybe even think of ways the family can support each other. These properties could really help. I cut her off, politely but firmly. They're not these properties. They're my properties. The room went still. I looked at Diane. For the record, I wasn't hiding anything. I was choosing privacy. And your notary visit proved I made the right choice. Diane straightened. I was only thinking of Liam's future. He is my future, I said. And the two of us will decide what's fair. You don't get a vote. Her eyes flashed, just briefly. Then she smiled again. You're very independent. That's one word for it, I replied. My grandmother had another. She called it prepared. Liam reached over and took my hand, subtle, but strong. Diane looked at him. You're okay with this? With her making these kinds of decisions without including you? Liam shrugged. She's not obligated to include anyone in something that happened before we met. And let's be honest, if she had told you, we both know how that would have gone. Diane said nothing. Erica took a breath. I came here today not to argue, but to draw a line, I said. I'm not against helping family. I believe in support, in generosity. But what I don't believe in is manipulation wrapped in concern. I've watched the way you question me in front of others. The way you smile while trying to box me in. That ends here. Aunt Margaret cleared her throat. That's a bit harsh, dear. I turned to her. I'm not being harsh. I'm being honest, something this family says it values. There was silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, Liam's father finally spoke. Well, he said quietly. I think it's good that we're all clear now. It's your property, Erica. It was wrong to put you on the spot like that. Diane looked at him like he'd grown a second head. I know your intentions. He continued, looking at his wife. But you crossed a line. I stood up. We're going home, I said. Diane opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. I wish you well. Truly. But I won't be cornered in my own marriage. Not by you. Not by anyone. Liam rose beside me. We walked out together. And for the first time since we'd said I do, I finally felt married. Not because of the vows, but because we'd just stood together, as a unit. A week passed after the family meeting. There were no more notaries. No more contracts. No more veiled accusations. Instead, Diane sent flowers. Then a text. Thinking of you both. Hope you're feeling settled. Let me know if you want to talk. Bouquet. I almost laughed. Not because I believed her, but because I recognized the tactic. She'd switched strategies. The direct approach had failed. So now, she'd pivoted. From legal, to emotional. 2 weeks later. Liam and I were having dinner, pasta, wine, a jazz playlist in the background, when he looked up mid-bite and said, My mom called today. I paused. Yeah? She asked if we've started thinking about kids. There it was. The next phase. I set my fork down. What did you say? I told her we weren't in a rush. That we'd talk about it when we were ready. And what did she say? Liam sighed. She said she'd love to help. That she has resources. That it would make sense to start planning ahead. Especially if we wanted to use one of your apartments as a nursery. I blinked. She brought up the apartments again? He nodded. Casually. As if it was just a helpful suggestion. Of course she did. She'd failed to get a signature. Failed to twist the prenup. Now she wanted to make herself indispensable. That weekend, she invited us over. Just for tea. The tone was sugar-coated. The bait. Unmistakable. We went. Because part of me needed to see what she'd try next. She opened the door with a wide smile. Come in. I made shortbread. And decaf for you, Erica, just in case. She winked. I stared at her for a beat. Just in case I'm pregnant already? Clever. We sat. She poured tea. Talked about nothing, flowers, weather, a new neighbor who apparently parked terribly. And then, mid-sentence, she dropped it. You know, I've been looking at early childhood programs. Just reading. Nothing serious. But it's never too early to plan, right? Liam shifted in his seat. I didn't speak. Diane continued, and with your properties, Erica, you really have an advantage. Imagine raising a child in that sunlit apartment near the park. It's practically made for a nursery. I smiled. That apartment's currently rented for $3,200 a month. That nursery would cost me quite a bit in lost income. She laughed, too high-pitched. Oh, I didn't mean now. Just, eventually. She looked at Liam. Don't you want your child growing up close to family? There it was. Not a suggestion. Not even a request. A positioning statement. If you have a child, I expect to be involved. After we left, I was quiet in the car. Liam looked over. You okay? She's not giving up, I said. I know. I don't want our child being used as a bargaining chip. Neither do I. That night, I sat alone in the living room, scrolling through old messages from my grandmother. There was one I'd bookmarked. From the week before she passed. It read, love your future child enough to protect their environment. You're not just raising them, you're also teaching them what to allow. I stared at those words for a long time. Because I knew now. Diane wasn't trying to win me over. She was trying to outlast me. Wear me down until I gave her what she couldn't demand outright. And when I found out I was pregnant 3 months later, I didn't tell anyone. Not right away. Not even Liam. Because I needed a minute to decide how I was going to do this. Not just as a woman. Not just as a wife. But as someone who would now be someone's mother, and their shield. I found out I was pregnant on a Wednesday morning. The test stick blinked back at me like a secret. 2 lines. Faint, but firm. I sat on the bathroom floor in silence for almost 10 minutes. It wasn't fear. It wasn't shock. It was stillness. Because this wasn't just a child. It was a pivot point. Everything in me knew this would change the game. I waited 2 days before telling Liam. He'd just come home from work, tired and dusty from helping the science department move lab equipment. I met him at the door with a quiet smile and a folded note card. Inside, I'd written. Estimated arrival, March 14th. Bring snacks. It's going to be a long ride. Team Dawson. He read it 3 times before looking up. His eyes watered. He didn't say much. Just hugged me. Held on longer than usual. And whispered. I'll protect both of you. We didn't tell anyone else. Not yet. Not because we weren't happy. But because we were finally peaceful. No battles. No signatures. No suggestions. Just us. That peace lasted exactly 12 days. It started with a phone call from Aunt Margaret. She left a message. So exciting. Diane says you're expecting. Congratulations, sweetheart. I can't wait for the baby shower next month. I'm bringing deviled eggs. I froze. Liam was standing at the sink, washing a pan. Did you tell your aunt? He shook his head. No one. I swear. I played the voicemail on speaker. He stared at the counter, processing. Then muttered. She must have gone through my texts. Apparently he had typed March 14th in a shared Google Calendar. He didn't think she checked it anymore, but clearly, she did. Diane had seen it. And done what Diane does best. Took what wasn't hers. And made it hers. The next day, we got an invitation in the mail. A pastel envelope. Tiny gold ducks and a smiling stork on the front. Inside, inscripted font. Baby shower honoring Erica Dawson. Hosted by Diane Whitman. RSVP by October 10th. Location, the Whitman residence. Gifts welcome, registry link enclosed. Theme, roots and wings, because every child deserves both. I stared at the card. No one had asked me. No one had asked us. She'd taken my pregnancy. And thrown a party on it. Liam was livid. He wanted to call. Confront her. But I said no. She's expecting us to push back. I said. Let's do something she's not ready for. We didn't RSVP. We didn't show up. Instead, we sent a message of our own. A handwritten card. White envelope. No glitter. No bows. Inside, I wrote. Thank you for your enthusiasm. We're planning an intimate gathering on our own terms. We'll let you know when and if that includes guests. Simple. Civil, final. We mailed it. Diane didn't respond for a week. Then she called Liam. I listened from the hallway. You've hurt me, she said. I just wanted to celebrate. You made me look like a fool in front of the whole family. Liam kept his tone neutral. You invited people to an event we never approved. You used our child as a prop. That's not celebration, Mom. That's performance. There was a pause. Then, well, I hope she doesn't plan to keep that baby away from us too. That's when I walked into the room and took the phone. Diane, I said calmly, I plan to raise my child with respect, boundaries, and space to breathe. The same things I've been asking from you since the day we met. Silence. Then she said, flatly, I suppose I won't be needed then. I replied, that's up to you. But if you want to be part of our lives, you'll need to stop treating us like we owe you access. Then I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I made tea. I folded a baby blanket I'd ordered online. And for the first time in years, I felt completely in control. Our son was born on a rainy Tuesday in March. The sky outside our hospital room was the color of slate, and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and new beginnings. I'd never felt so tired. Or so alive. Liam held my hand through the entire 12-hour labor. He didn't flinch. Didn't leave. He whispered encouragement even when I could barely breathe. And when they placed our baby on my chest. Soft. Warm, blinking into the world. I cried. Not because it hurt. Not because I was overwhelmed. But because he was ours. Not a contract. Not an asset. Not a pawn. Just ours. We named him Caleb Daniel Dawson. After my grandmother. After Liam's favorite teacher. He came into the world with a full head of hair and a quiet stare that seemed to say, I've been watching this whole time. We didn't post on social media. Didn't send out mass texts. Just a few calls. A few photos. And silence. Diane found out from Liam's cousin. Apparently someone had seen a tagged photo of the hospital bracelet on a private story. She called 2 days later. Congratulations, she said stiffly. He looks healthy. I thanked her. She cleared her throat. I'd like to visit. Briefly. Bring some things. Family heirlooms. A quilt my grandmother made. I paused. Diane, I said gently, I know you love Liam. And I believe you'll love Caleb, too. But this visit, it needs to be on our terms. Silence. Then. I'm his grandmother. I know, I replied. But I'm his mother. She came the next week. Wore pearls. Brought a baby book with her handwriting already on the first page, memories of our first year. Didn't ask to hold him. She sat awkwardly on the edge of our couch, legs crossed. Eyes wandering. Then she spoke. Soft. Uncharacteristic. You know. I thought if I stayed ahead of everything, I could protect him. I looked at her. But he didn't need protection from me. She added. He needed protection from me. It wasn't an apology. But it was the closest she'd ever get. We let her stay for an hour. She watched Liam change a diaper. Watched me feed Caleb. Watched the life she thought she'd orchestrated unfold without her hands on it. When she left, she didn't kiss Caleb. But she did leave the quilt. And when I unfolded it later, stitched into the corner was one word, patience. I smiled. Maybe she was learning. Over the next few months, things settled. Diane sent gifts, but no advice. She asked before visiting. She even began addressing cards to the Dawsons instead of just Liam. We never had a big blowout. No dramatic confrontation. Just space. And space was exactly what we needed. I still think about the silence. The one I kept when I didn't disclose my inheritance. The one that protected me before I had the words to defend myself. The one that made people question, judge, speculate. But silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's self-respect wrapped in restraint. And in a world where people like Diane exist, people who mistake kindness for compliance and information for entitlement, silence is sometimes the loudest way to say, you don't get to decide who I am. Now, when Caleb naps against my chest, and the house is quiet, I often run my fingers along that quilt patience. Sometimes, I tuck Caleb's tiny socks into the same drawer where I used to keep my old toolbox. The life I built with my hands now holds what I made with my heart. It took years. To build a life. To build boundaries. To build a voice that doesn't yell but still gets heard. And if one day, my son asks why we did things the way we did, I'll tell him. Because love doesn't control. It holds space. And if someone tries to shrink your life to fit inside their comfort zone, you owe them your clarity, not your compliance.